In the wealthy suburbs of Austin, Texas, the night had never felt so heavy. The tall glass windows of the Hayes mansion reflected a man broken beyond recognition. Michael Hayes, once celebrated as a visionary millionaire, sat at his mahogany desk staring at the letter that confirmed his bankruptcy. Years of ambition, late nights, and endless board meetings had turned into a few cruel sentences on paper: insufficient funds, liquidation pending. The silence around him was deafening, interrupted only by the faint ticking of a clock that once symbolized precision and control. Now it marked the slow unraveling of everything he had built. For the first time in years, Michael felt powerless, stripped of the empire that had defined him. His wife, Clara, entered the room, her heels echoing sharply against the marble floor. She wore a red coat, elegance unshaken by his failure. "Michael," she began, her tone colder than the night air, "you said this would never happen." He didn't respond. He couldn't. She sighed, glancing at the half-empty glass of whiskey on his desk. "I didn't marry you to live poor," she added with a bitter smile. Her words stung, not because of their cruelty, but because they revealed what he had always feared. She loved his success, not him. Under the dim chandelier light, Clara packed her designer luggage, ignoring his silence, and walked out of the mansion without a backward glance. The door shut with a thud that sounded final, like the last chapter of a story he no longer controlled. For days, the house stood still. The echoes of laughter, parties, and polished footsteps were replaced by quiet despair. The expensive furniture and grand paintings looked hollow, trophies of a life that had slipped away. Michael stopped eating, barely slept, and sat by the fireplace every night, watching the embers fade. But amidst the emptiness, one figure remained: Anna, his young maid. She was barely 23, gentle in her movements, with eyes that spoke more than words. She had seen the fall of the house she worked in, yet she stayed. She cleaned quietly, left meals on the table, and never once asked about her salary. One evening, she found him sitting at the dining table surrounded by unpaid bills and unopened letters. His shoulders slumped, his face pale. She hesitated, then walked closer and spoke softly: "Sir, maybe money isn't gone. Maybe it's just hiding until you learn what truly matters." Her voice trembled slightly, but her words landed like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Michael looked up for the first time in days, eyes tired but curious. He didn't reply, yet those words echoed in his mind long after she left the room. The next morning, when he woke up, the house smelled of freshly brewed coffee and buttered toast. Anna stood in the kitchen, apron dusted with flour, smiling shyly. "Breakfast, sir," she said simply. He noticed the effort. The house was cleaner, brighter. For the first time, he realized how much she had been doing silently. She repaired small things, watered the plants, kept the garden alive. He felt humbled. "You don't have to do all this," he murmured. She shook her head. "I don't work for money right now, sir. I work for peace." Her simplicity pierced deeper than any lecture or sermon could. Days turned into weeks. Michael began to regain fragments of his old self. One afternoon, while going through old business files, Anna pointed out an idea he had abandoned years ago: a renewable energy prototype. "This could still work," she said eagerly. Her curiosity sparked something in him. Together, they began rebuilding. She typed while he sketched. They shared coffee over spreadsheets, laughter over mistakes, and hope over uncertainty. Slowly, he realized that her presence filled a silence money never could. She wasn't just a maid, she was the reason he was trying again. Weeks later, a small investor showed interest in their eco-energy project. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start. Michael began smiling again, not the proud smile of a rich man, but the quiet one of someone rediscovering life. When Clara called one evening, pretending to check on him, he simply said, "I'm doing fine," and ended the call without a hint of pain. That night, Anna found him working late in the study. "You should rest," she said softly. He looked at her and replied, "Rest can wait. Hope can't." Months passed, and the little project started to grow. Investors returned, slowly rebuilding what had been lost. Yet Michael knew the real treasure wasn't the money, it was the lesson hidden in his fall. The loyalty of one humble soul had rebuilt what greed had destroyed. As he stood by the window one morning, watching sunlight pour into the once dark halls, he realized that the mansion didn't feel empty anymore. It wasn't wealth that made a home, it was kindness. But destiny had another plan waiting in the distant desert, one that would test his heart in ways he could never imagine. The cold desert night wrapped itself around Michael's cabin like a blanket of silence. He sat near the fire, its glow flickering across the rough wooden walls. The sound of the storm outside was distant but steady, a reminder of how far he was from the noise of the city. After months of rebuilding his life, he had come to New Mexico seeking peace, not knowing destiny had prepared something deeper. The image of the boy's fragile body still haunted him, the way his small fingers clutched at Michael's sleeve, too weak to speak. Saving him hadn't been a choice, it was instinct, human and pure. When Michael first carried the boy into the reservation clinic, his heart raced faster than it had in years. The doctors rushed forward, speaking in low, urgent voices as they checked the child's pulse. Michael stood back, covered in sand, watching helplessly. Hours later, when they told him the boy would live, something inside him softened. For the first time since his bankruptcy, he felt truly useful, not as a businessman, but as a man capable of compassion. He stayed in the small waiting area, refusing to leave until the boy opened his eyes. When the child finally did, whispering a few words in his native Apache tongue, Michael smiled for the first time in days. He spent the following nights sitting by the child's bedside, bringing soup, telling quiet stories, and sometimes just watching him sleep. It reminded him of when life was simpler, before the cars, the contracts, and the endless pursuit of profit. The desert had a strange way of stripping away everything unnecessary, leaving only what truly mattered. Michael began to realize how far he had drifted from humanity during his years of success. The world had taught him that money meant power, but this tiny boy, frail and silent, taught him that life's true currency was kindness. He didn't share the story with Anna or anyone else, it felt too sacred, too fragile to explain. On the fourth night, the desert wind carried something different, a stillness before change. The knock on the door came soft but steady, like fate itself asking permission to enter. Michael opened it to see three Apache women standing under the pale moonlight, their traditional shawls fluttering in the cold breeze. Their eyes told stories older than time, of survival, loss, and gratitude. One woman stepped forward and said in a trembling voice, "You saved our son, our bloodline. The spirits sent you." She held out a small carved wooden necklace, polished smooth with age. Michael accepted it with both hands, feeling its weight. Not heavy, but meaningful. As they turned to leave, he stood silently by the door, the firelight casting long shadows across the sand. He looked down at the necklace, the intricate symbols etched into its surface. It seemed to glow faintly in the fire's reflection. For years, he had worn expensive watches and custom gold chains, but none of them had ever made him feel what this small wooden gift did. It was a symbol of life, of being connected to something bigger than himself. He placed it gently on the table beside the sleeping boy and sat quietly, overwhelmed by emotion. The storm outside had ended, replaced by the calm hum of the night. Michael's phone buzzed suddenly, breaking the silence. It was Anna. Her voice was shaking with excitement and disbelief. "Sir, our company just got its first big investor. You did it," she said, tears audible even through the call. Michael smiled faintly, his gaze drifting toward the child and the necklace beside him. "No, Anna," he whispered softly, "we did it. Kindness did." It was as if the universe had waited for him to rediscover compassion before blessing him again. Success had returned, but this time, it carried a soul. He sat there for hours, reflecting on everything that had happened. The fall, the betrayal, the loneliness, they all suddenly made sense. Each loss had been a lesson guiding him to this moment of quiet understanding. The fire burned lower, the stars outside shimmered across the endless desert, and for the first time, Michael didn't feel the need to chase anything. He had already found what he had been searching for: peace, purpose, and the warmth of humanity. As he drifted into sleep beside the faint crackle of the dying embers, the carved necklace glowed softly, as if the spirits themselves were watching over him, reminding him that true wealth was never lost, only waiting to be found again.